Hello, welcome to another episode of Critic.Reading.Writing. My name is Quayson, and I'm a professor of English at Stanford University. Today, I want to use Euripides' Medea to talk about companionateness in marriage, exile, and revenge. Now, Medea is one of the most well-known of the Greek tragedies. And one of the reasons for its power is that Medea kills her two sons to spite Jason. And so it has gone down in different literary traditions as a great example of infanticide. However, what I want to explore are the reasons why Medea undertakes this horrific action. Now, when the play opens, we find ourselves in Corinth. Medea comes from a place called Colchis. And so, according to the Greeks, she's a barbarian. She has been brought to Corinth by her husband Jason. But on arrival, Jason has abandoned her and gone to marry the daughter of Creon, the king of Corinth. Now, this incenses Medea, and partly because of this feeling of disloyalty, not just abandonment, but disloyalty, she designs to punish Jason by killing their two sons. The process by which she comes to this decision is what is of interest to me today because it reveals some intersecting ideas and principles that go well beyond the simple question of her marriage to Jason. When the play opens, we find the nurse, who is Medea's right-hand woman, talking by herself to the audience and telling how bad Medea is feeling. And this is what we see. Before Jason's house in Corinth, nurse, if only they had never gone. If the Argo's hull never had winged out through the grey-blue jaws of rock and on towards Colchis. If that pine on Pelion's slopes had never felt the axe and fallen to put oars into those heroes' hands, who went at Peleus' bidding to fetch the golden fleece, then neither would Medea, my mistress, ever have set sail for the walled town of Eurylochus, mad with love for Jason, nor would she, when Peleus' daughters, at her instance, killed their father, have come with Jason and her children to live here in Corinth, where, coming as an exile, she has earned the citizens' welcome. While to Jason, she's all obedience. And in marriage, that's the saving thing, when a wife obediently accepts her husband's will. But now her world has turned to enmity and wounds her where her affections deepest. Jason has betrayed his own sons and my mistress for a royal bed, for alliance with the king of Corinth. He has married Glauce, Creon's daughter. Poor Medea, scorned and shamed, she raves, invoking every vow and solemn pledge that Jason made her, and calls the gods as witnesses what thanks she has received for her fidelity. She will not eat. She lies collapsed in agony, dissolving the long hours in tears. Since first she heard of Jason's wickedness, she has not raised her eyes or moved her cheek from the hard ground. And when her friends reason with her, she might be a rock or wave of the sea for all she hears. Unless maybe she turns away her lovely head, speaks to herself alone, and wails aloud for her dear father, her own land and home, which she betrayed and left to come here with this man who now spurns and insults her. Poor Medea. Now she learns through pain what blessings they enjoy who are not uprooted from their native land. She hates her sons. To see them is no pleasure to her. I am afraid some dreadful purpose is forming in her mind. She's a frightening woman. No one who makes an enemy of her will carry off an easy victory. Now, this first speech, opening the play by the nurse, lays out, first of all, certain historical details to the play, which include the fact that Medea joined Jason and the Argonauts on the quest for the golden fleece. Also, that she conspired to get Peleus murdered by his own daughters. The story of how she did that is really fascinating. Also, she's a sorceress. This is one point we need to recall. But more importantly, that she has now arrived in Corinth with Jason as an exile. And on their arrival, Jason has abandoned her for apparently pragmatic reasons to strike up an alliance with Creon, the king of Corinth. And then we have a very painful description of her, what we would understand as depression. She cries incessantly. She lies on the ground, her cheeks close to the floor, and she hardly ever gets up. And when she turns her face, it is all wet with tears. But the nurse also introduces a theme which is going to become more resonant later. And this is that she might be a rock or wave of the sea. This association of forces of nature, rock and wave of the sea, with Medea's character turns out to be quite appropriate, because as the play progresses, she purges herself of any sentiment. So all the tears that we see her crying, and she's described as crying, are actually a process of purgation. And she becomes a true force of nature toward the end of the play. When Medea appears shortly after this, she confirms what the nurse has said about her. She is full of tears. She is morose and despondent. But the nurse has also hinted that she has a premonition that Medea is planning something. What it is at this stage, no one knows. And Medea is indeed planning something, but for all intents and purposes, in her first appearance, we see a woman bereft of support. The other important thing that the nurse has also laid out, and which is picked up later by Medea, is that for her to marry Jason and to come to Corinth, she had to break all relations with her own family, with her father. And we'll see in the next extract how those relations were broken with her own family. In other words, if we recall the episode on Aristotle and the Nicomachean Ethics, which will be put here, she is bereft of philia, of all the support and obligations of friends and family. Medea's marriage requires that she sever all links totally with her family and reconstruct a new form of philia with Jason. And so, because of this radical interruption of her philia, the fact that Jason abandons her for the princess, it doesn't just irk her as a woman scorned, but it touches to the heart of her loss of family and friends. It is almost like a parable of marriage in which the relations of family in the past have to be completely severed in order that the marriage succeed. As I mentioned in the episode on Philoctetes, which we put here, the Greeks were adept at using extreme circumstances to illustrate various moral and philosophical issues. And in this case, what is at issue here is what is the significance of marriage when it requires the complete severance of all previous ties of family. At any rate, Medea is going to have one of two major clashes with Jason. And the first one is what I want us to look at. And this is what we see. Enter Jason. Jason, I have noticed, this is not the first occasion, what fatal results follow from ungoverned rage. You could have stayed in Corinth, still lived in this house, if you had quietly accepted the decisions of those in power. Instead, you talked like a fool, and now you are banished. Well, your angry words don't upset me. Go on as long as you like reciting Jason's crimes. But after your abuse of the king and the princess, think yourself lucky to be left off with banishment. I have tried all the time to calm them down, but you would not give up your ridiculous tirade against the royal family. So you are banished. However, I will not desert a friend. I have carefully considered your problem and come now, in spite of everything, to see that you and the children are not sent away with an empty purse or unprovided. Exile brings with it a train of difficulties. You no doubt hate me, but I could never bear ill will to you. Medea. You filthy coward! If I knew any worse name for such unmanliness, I'll use it. So you've come, you, my worst enemy, come to me. It's not courage, this looking friends in the face after betraying them. It is not even audacity. It is a disease, the worst a man can have, pure shamelessness. However, it is well you came. To say what I have to say will ease my heart. To hear it said will make you wince. I will begin at the beginning. When you were sent to master the fire-breathing bulls, yoke them, and sow the deadly furrow, then I saved your life. And that every Greek who sailed with you in the Argo knows. The serpent that kept watch over the golden fleece coiled round it fold on fold, and sleeping. It was I who killed it, and so lit the torch of your success. I willingly deceived my father, left my home. With you, I came to Iolcus by Mount Pelion, showing much love and little wisdom. There I put King Peleus to the most horrible of their deaths by his own daughter's hands, and ruined his whole house. And in return for this, you have the wickedness to turn me out, to get yourself another wife, even after I had borne you sons. If you had still been childless, I could have pardoned you for hankering after this new marriage. But respect for oaths has gone to the wind. Do you, I wonder, think that the old gods no longer rule, or that new laws are now in force? You must know you are guilty of perjury to me. My poor right hand, which you so often clasped, my knees, which you then clung to, how we are besmirched and mocked by this man's broken vows, and all our hopes deceived. Come, I'll ask your advice as if you were a friend. Not that I hope for any help from you, but still, I'll ask you and expose your infamy. Where now can I turn? Back to my country and my father's house, which I betrayed to come with you? Or to Iolcus, to Peleus' wretched daughters? What a welcome they would offer me who killed their father. Thus it stands, my friends at home now hate me. And in helping you, I have earned the enmity of those I had no right to hurt. For my reward, you have made me the envy of Hellene women everywhere. A marvelous husband I have, and faithful too, in the name of pity. When I'm banished, thrown out of the country without a friend, alone with my forlorn waifs, yes, a shining shame it will be to you, the new-made bridegroom, that your own sons and I, who saved your life, are begging beside the road. Now, some of what we see here in Medea's rage toward her ex-husband, or at least her treacherous husband, it seems predictable. It's predictable in that it is the standard rage of a woman scorned and betrayed. So the sense of shame and grief is what she is expressing in this rage. But in expressing her rage to Jason, she's also laying out certain principles which are key to how she understood their marriage. She reminds him that it was she who helped him win the golden fleece. It was she who gave him the secret for passing the trials that her own father had set him. And it was she who let the unsleeping serpent that guarded the golden fleece to fall asleep so that he would be able to win the final prize. But it is not just that she reminds him that it was she, through her sorcery, that helps him to overcome all the major impediments toward his goal, but that in doing this, she betrays her own family, because we know she betrays her father. But more than that, and this is not mentioned in this passage, when her father sends forces in pursuit of the Argo, she dismembers her own brother. She chops her brother into little pieces and drops him in the sea, knowing full well that her father and his troops will be diverted to gather the pieces of his son. And by this means, she allows Jason and the Argonauts to escape. The upshot of all this is that she has completely destroyed any basis of familial ties back home. But the other thing that she let him understand that is that in the course of helping to win the golden fleece, she has also made enemies of people that she ought not to have hurt, such as Peleus and his daughters. She uses some trickery to get Peleus' daughters to kill their father. So she's made enemies every which way. However, the key thing about these reminders is not simply that she has helped him powerfully through whatever resources she has, but that she understood the marriage to be founded on the basis of companionateness. That is to say, she saw herself as his companion. His companion at the same level as any of the great Argonauts that he sailed with. Now, this principle of companionateness also means that when he made vows to her, the vows were as if to bind the spirits of people who were equally heroic. And so his disavowal of the vows by betraying her and going to marry another woman is not simply the betrayal of vows to his wife, but actually to a companion in arms. Now, the principle of companionateness in relationships has a long history in literature. A good example is in Shakespeare's romantic comedies, where in plays such as A Midsummer Night's Dream or Twelfth Night or As You Like It, the young lovers are supposed to be purged through devices such as mistaken identity and all the chaos of the middle portions of Shakespeare's romantic comedies. The young lovers are purged of false idealizations of what love is. They're also purged of any ideas of inequality because some of those false idealizations also place women on a too high pedestal and denaturalize them. It's like women are in the idealization of romantic love, they're actually not human. And so part of what Shakespeare designs to do is to purge the young lovers of these false idealizations so that at the end of the actions of the romantic comedies, they can marry as equal. And this principle of companionateness then becomes definitive of some of his comedies, not all. Other comedies have different principles of organization. Now, in Medea, we also find this principle of companionateness asserted, but in a completely different way. Because what Medea is trying to remind Jason of is that she is his companion in arms, and that his vows to her are not merely the vows between a husband and a wife, but vows of equal partners in struggle. Because, of course, the quest for the golden fleece required a lot of struggle, a lot of the overcoming of impediments, and a lot of tests of what it was to be a hero. So she's reminding him that she's not just an ordinary wife that he can bring to exile and just abandon. She's his companion. And she has been a companion on equal footing with all the Argonauts in terms of all the wonderful things they did to get to the golden fleece, and that to him. And so her anger is not merely the anger of a spurned wife, but it is also the anger of a companion hero. And it is this anger that is fused with the completely standard anger of a wife. And that fuels what she does next, because she punishes him not just as a wife, but as a hero, as a hero who has achieved great things by his side. After this first conversation, things unravel very quickly. Now, if we remember, when the nurse was talking about her mistress at the opening that we saw a moment ago, she had premonitions that Medea was up to something bad, because she's not a woman to be easily crossed. But the nurse could not have anticipated what that something was, because it was much worse than anyone could have predicted. Medea designs to send gifts to Glauke, that is the daughter of the king of Creon. She sends her with her children a gown and a coronet, but these are both poisoned. And so when Glauke puts them on, her skin begins to burn, her skin begins to eat away. And there's a description in the play which is almost lifted from a horror movie. If it could be made into a movie, it would be a really horrible scene. So her skin begins to eat away very quickly. And her father comes into her chamber and sees his daughter writhing in agony on the ground, and goes to hold her to calm her down. And he also gets eaten up by the fieriness of the coronet and the crown. So both the king and the princess die a really horrible death. Now, by this one stroke, Medea has succeeded in depriving Jason of the pragmatic support that he thought he would gain from entering into this marriage with the royal household of Corinth. But she has something else to do, which is that she kills her two sons. Now, in the lead up to killing her two sons, we find her toing and froing, very despondent and tearful, and telling the chorus of Corinthian women what he's going to do. They try to persuade her unsuccessfully, of course. And all this struggle also bespeaks the fact that she has to go through a process of making up her mind. Unlike what we saw in Toni Morrison's Beloved, which episode will be put up here, where in the case of Sethe, her killing of her daughter was unpremeditated. She had no time to think. As soon as she saw the hearts of the school teacher and the other slave catchers, she just gathered her children, ran into the barn, and proceeded to cut off the throat of the 2-year-old and to try and kill the others. There was no time for Sethe to think. In the case of Medea, she had lots of time. From the very first instance where she begins to contemplate killing her son, she talks about it. She talks about it to the chorus of Corinthian women. She anguishes over it. But this anguish, it turns out, is her process of purging herself of any maternal instincts. Because actually what is happening throughout the play is that Medea is becoming a force of nature, something that the nurse had hinted at by referring her to a rock or the waves of the sea. Medea actually purges herself in thinking and in anguishing about her children. She purges herself of any maternal instincts, so that by the end, when she kills them and Jason confronts her at the end, she's not who she was to start the play with. She is a force of nature. One thing that we also have to keep in mind when reading Medea is that even though she's human, she is actually descendant from divine beings. Her grandfather is Helios, god of the sun. And it is her grandfather Helios who brings down a chariot to swoop her up at the very end with the bodies of her dead sons in the chariot, and Jason standing below in complete anguish at what has happened. And so by the end of the play, through this device of the Deus ex machina, she is whisked away in glorious sunburst. Now, this ending demarcates quite clearly the distinction between Medea as a human being, as an ordinary mortal, and Medea as a quite implacable force of nature. Now, we might also argue that this transition is a transition that has come specifically due to the wounds that she has received, first from the implied necessity of completely severing herself from philia, represented by family. Secondly, by making so many enemies in support of Jason. But most importantly, by the absolute nature of her love. That absoluteness is one that makes it such that the loss of it switches her to another form of absoluteness. In other words, she loves absolutely to the point of severing ties with all what lies behind her. But when she loses the love of Jason through his betrayal, she switches to a different form of absolute, which is absolute vengeance. But in this vengeance, she wants to visit upon Jason all the feelings of loss that comes from being completely severed from family and friends and all kinds of support. In other words, her own feeling of being an alien is what she produces, she generates to make Jason feel the same sense of deep loss that he had made her feel. And so then the play becomes a parable of vengeance writ large, because it is not merely the vengeance of you did this to me, and so I'm going to do that to you, but it is the vengeance of you made me feel this, and so I'm going to make you feel the exact same thing. I'm going to replicate that feeling of loss and make you feel it as fully as I felt it. Medea is a terrifying tragedy, but it bears many lessons about what it is to love, to lose, and to reconstruct one's life. Thank you very much. Please remember to subscribe and share and hit the notifications bell so that you do not miss any upcoming episode, and enter your comments in the section below. See you next week.